You're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Moses Boyd, his biography, and best hits. Moses Boyd is a drummer, producer, bandleader, and one of the architects of the new London jazz movement. Born and raised in Catford, South London, and of Jamaican and Dominican heritage, Moses Boyd grew up at the crossroads of cultures and sounds. By his early teens, he was listening to Miles Davis and grime pioneers like Wiley with equal passion. And that mix of jazz tradition and UK street culture has defined his music ever since. He came up through the legendary Tomorrow's Warriors program, studied at Trinity Laban Conservatoire, and quickly became known not just as a powerful drummer but as a fearless musical thinker. From the dynamic free jazz duo Binka and Moses to his genre-blending solo work and Mercury Prize-nominated album Dark Matter, Boyd has consistently pushed jazz into new territory, bringing elements of grime, Afrobeat, hip-hop and electronic music without losing the soul of the art form. So we're going to be talking about Moses Boyd's story, his musical evolution, and a deep dive into some of his most essential albums, the records that defined his sound and his impact. So that was some insight into the biography and best hits of Moses Boyd. More details coming up. Also coming up, some trendy music news. Stay tuned to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva to find out more. We'll be right back out some music. And you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan De Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Moses Boyd, his biography and best hits. During this summer, we're going to be talking about his biography. Now, when people talk about the new London jazz movement, certain names always come up. Nubia Garcia, Shabaga Hutchins, Theon Cross, Ezra Collective. And right there, the heartbeat of the whole ecosystem is Moses Boyd, often literally because rhythm is where he lives. Moses Boyd was born and raised in Catford, South London, an area rich in musical history and cultural diversity. He comes from Jamaican and Dominican heritage, and you can hear the lineage in his music. Not in a surface level way, but in a deeper sense of rhythm, groove, spirituality, and resistance. This is music that moves your body, but it also carries memory. Like many musicians of his generation, Boyd didn't grow up listening to only one thing. His ears were wide open from an early age. By the time he was about 13 years old, he was listening just as deeply to Miles Davis as he was to early grime pioneers like Wiley. Imagine that for a second. Modal jazz on one side, raw London street energy on the other. That duality became crucial to understanding who Moses Boyd is today. He starts playing drums seriously in his teens, and one name comes up again and again when Boyd talks about his influences, Tony Allen, the legendary drum behind Fela Kuti's Afrobeat revolution. From Allen, Boyd absorbs the idea that the drum kit isn't just a time-keeping device, it's a conversation, it's melody, it's architecture. Another major part of Boyd's development comes through Tomorrow's Warriors, a groundbreaking youth jazz organization founded by Gary Crosby and J. Nine Irons. Tomorrow's Warriors has quietly shaped generations of black British jazz musicians, and Moses Boyd is one of the most powerful success stories. This is where he finds community. He later goes on to study jazz at Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and Dance in Greenwich, graduating in 2016. But what's interesting is that Boyd never positions formal education as the main thing. For him, school exists alongside club culture, jam sessions, basement shows, and dance floors. And that balance becomes his signature. By the mid-2010s, Moses Boyd is already gaining attention, but not as a solo star. Instead, he comes up as a part of a duo that quickly becomes legendary, Binka and Moses alongside saxophonist Binka Golden. They form in 2014 and their chemistry is immediate, just saxophone and drums. Their debut album, Dem Ones, lands in 2015 and hits like a lightning bolt. Raw, fully improvised, high energy. The record wins at the Mobo Award for Best Jazz Act. They follow that with Journey to the Mountain of Forever in 2017, and then the live album, Alive in the East in 2018. Across these releases, Binka and Moses established themselves as one of the most fearless duos in modern jazz. And importantly, Moses Boyd proves something essential. He's a serious jazz drummer with deep chops, not just a genre mangler. At the same time, Boyd is quietly building another lane. He launches his own imprint Exodus Records and forms a Moses Boyd Exodus ensemble. This side of his work leans into production, electronics and groove-based writing. He releases electronic plays and mixtapes, experimenting with chopped drums, synth textures, samples and club rhythms. This is where Boyd begins to show himself not just as a drummer but as a producer in the fullest sense. He's also becoming one of the most in-demand collaborators in the UK and beyond. He produces Zara McFarlane's acclaimed album Arise. He plays drums on Sons of Kemet's Mercury-nominated Your Queen is a Reptile. He tours with Sampha and Kelsey Liu. He appears on tracks with Little Sims, Lonnie Liston Smith, Ed Motta and Avonjaya. He even contributes via South African groove producer DJ Leg to music connected to Beyoncé's The Lion King, The Gift era. And that range tells you everything. Jazz clubs, hip-hop studios, electronic festivals, soul sessions, global pop projects. Moses Boyd moves between all of them without changing who he is. In 2019, Boyd becomes a familiar voice on the airwaves, hosting a monthly show on BBC Radio, where he plays live jazz jams alongside club tracks, broken beat and experimental electronic music. Again, no borders. But the real turning point comes in 2020 with the release of his first full-length solo studio album, Dark Matter. This album changes everything. It becomes one of the very first jazz records ever to be shortlisted for the Mercury Prize, placing Moses Boyd firmly in the national cultural conversation. Boyd describes Dark Matter as about 80% written and 20% improvised. That statement alone tells you how he thinks. He's composing like a producer but leaving space for jazz's spirit of risk. He also produces and engineers the entire album himself. Dark matter doesn't try to imitate American jazz tradition. Instead, it sounds like London. It absorbs grime, Afrobeat, broken beat, techno, hip-hop and ambient music into a jazz framework. It's bass-heavy, it's cinematic, it's emotional. And beneath the surface, there's social awareness. Boyd has spoken about how events like the Windrush scandal and the Grenfell Tower tragedy seeped in the mood of the album. Not as slogans, not as protest chants, but as atmosphere, as weight. Since then, Moses Boyd's reputation has only grown. He's won multiple Jazz FM awards, Mobo's, the Giles Peterson John Peel Play More Jazz Award, and the Worshipful Company of Musicians Young Jazz Musician Medal. And you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Moses Boyd, his biography and best hits. Now it's time for some trending music news. So let's talk about an artist who truly lives at the intersection of creativity and invention, composer, guitarist and innovator Jack West. West has just dropped not one but two powerful releases on Ota Records. First up, Guitars on Live, a stunning acoustic guitar duo album with fellow guitar explorer Walter Strauss, recorded mostly live in the studio. It's two guitars but it sounds like a full band, with West handling bass lines, chords and percussion, while Strauss floats intricate melodies on top. Tracks like the ecstatic take on Steve Wonder's I Wish, the driving groove of Double Bounce, and the reflective close of Follow the Water Down show just how wide his emotional and rhythmic range is. Alongside that, West has also released The Essential Curvature, a double long-play compilation featuring key recordings from his group Curvature between 1996 and 2003. Jack West isn't just a guitarist, he's a musical architect with over 100 patents, constantly reshaping what his acoustic guitar can do. Both albums are now out on Vinyl Digital. This is adventurous, rhythm-rich listening and it's not to be missed. So that was some trendy music news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan Silva. We're going for a short break, we'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some of Moses Boyd's best albums of all time. Stay tuned. And you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Moses Boyd, his biography and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up. So we're going to be talking about the albums that spotlight Moses as a solo artist, producer and band leader. We're going to be talking about the records where Boyd steps out front and starts shaping jazz not just as a drummer but as a sonic architect. That journey begins with his Mercury Prize nominated album Dark Matter, a groundbreaking release that blends jazz with UK club culture, grime, hip-hop, Afrobeat and electronic textures. It's a record that places live improvisation inside bold, forward-thinking production, and in many ways it defines Boyd's generation. We'll also dig into Displaced Diaspora, the debut album from the Moses Boyd Exodus Ensemble, a powerful snapshot of the emerging London jazz movement and a gathering of some of the scene's brightest voices. From there, we move to the Absolute Zero Electronic Play, a short but dynamic project that introduced Boyd's fusion of cosmic jazz and bass-heavy electronics. And finally, we are going to be talking about the early mixtapes Footsteps of Our Fathers and Time and Space, the experimental blueprints that show Boyd's ideas taking shape long before the spotlight arrived. So if you want to understand Moses Boyd's personal sound work, this is where it begins. And that was some exciting what's coming up during this hour, and you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashan Silva. We'll be right back after some music. Stay tuned. On this week's episode, it's about Moses Boyd, his biography and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums of all time. So we're going to be talking about Moses Boyd as a solo artist, producer and band leader on the body of work he's released under the Moses Boyd Exodus name. This is the chapter where Boyd fully steps into his own vision, where jazz meets a club, where live musicianship meets studio manipulation, and where London's bass culture becomes inseparable from modern jazz. So let's start with the record that changed everything, Dark Matter, released in 2020. Dark Matter isn't just Moses Boyd's debut solo studio album, it's a statement of intent. Released in February 2020 on Boyd's own Exodus Records, the album immediately made history by becoming one of the very few jazz records ever to be shortlisted for the Mercury Prize. That alone tells you how far beyond the jazz world this record traveled. But here's the key thing. Dark Matter doesn't chase crossover appeal. Instead, it brings the full weight of UK club culture into jazz. Boyd has described the album as 80% written, 20% improvised. Structures are tight, rhythms are layered, sounds are chopped, looped, and reshaped. In fact, Boyd has joked that some of the musicians on the album don't even recognize their own playing once he's finished processing it. Right from the opener, Stranger Than Fiction, you hear it. Brass stabs hit like alarms. Breakbeats snap and lurch. The drums don't swing in the traditional sense, they surge, pulling you forward. It sounds like jazz that has been raised in warehouses and night buses, not conservatoires. Then there's Only You, one of the album's most haunted moments. Built around a looping drum pattern, it captures what Boyd has described as a kind of crying in the club energy. That feeling of isolation and intensity that can exist even in the middle of a packed dance floor at 2 a.m. Vocals play a key role across the album, and Boyd chooses his collaborators carefully. On Shades of You, singer Poppy Aduja delivers a soulful, self-affirming performance that speaks to self-love and identity. On Dancing in the Dark, Obonjaya brings raw emotion to a track that reflects on Black British experience, particularly the sense of dreams colliding with harsh reality. Importantly, Dark Matter isn't a protest album in the obvious sense, but it's deeply shaped by its time. Boyd has spoken about how the Windrush scandal and the Grenfell Tower tragedy soaked into the mood of the music. You can hear that weight in the tension, the darkness, the sense of searching. From a producer standpoint, this album is astonishing. Boyd produces and engineers the entire project himself, blending live drums, piano, saxophone, synths, samples, and field recordings into a sound that feels spacious, cosmic, and grounded all at once. His drumming remains central, but he's treated as one color among many in a larger palette. The response was overwhelming. Critics called it a bold new direction for UK jazz. The album reached #2 on the UK jazz chart, even cracked the indie charts, proving that Boyd's vision could travel well beyond specialist audiences. But Dark Matter didn't appear out of nowhere. Its roots go deeper. 2 years earlier, Moses Boyd released Displaced Diaspora, the debut album by the Moses Boyd Exodus Ensemble. What's fascinating about this record is that much of it was actually recorded back in 2015, but Boyd deliberately held it back. Why? Because the scene hadn't caught up yet. By the time Displaced Diaspora finally dropped in 2018, the London jazz movement was in full bloom, and suddenly this album made perfect sense. The record is built around groove, rhythm, and collective energy. Tracks like Riley and Shuffle, later remixed by Fortet and Floating Points, become club jazz anthems, bridging the gap between live jazz performance and dance floor culture. The personnel reads like a who's who of modern UK jazz. Zara McFarlane, Nubia Garcia, Theon Cross, Joe Armand-Jones, and more. Many of them are Tomorrow's Warriors alumni, and you can hear the shared language, the trust, the chemistry. Musically, Displaced Diaspora is largely instrumental, driven by tight drumming and beat-led arrangements. Tracks like Rush Hour and City Nocturne pulse with urgency, capturing the feeling of London at night, movement, tension, possibility. Critics praise the album as a document of a moment. All About Jazz calls it a highly recommended rewind, noting how it captured the urgency and unity of a new London jazz scene. While it didn't dominate the chart, it cemented Boyd's reputation as a bandleader and producer capable of bringing an entire community together. Before the albums, there was the Absolute Zero electronic play released in 2017. Short, sharp, and fearless, this 4-track release was an omen of things to come. From the opening track, After Tomorrow, Boyd announces his intent. Angular drums, swirling synths, rhythms that feel closer to broken beat and grime than traditional jazz. Critics compare it to a polyrhythmic Madlib cut, and that's a perfect reference. Square Up is relentless, fast, pounding, almost jungle-like in its energy. Sirens builds tension with sparse piano chords and echoing drums. And the title track, Absolute Zero, nods directly to grime history, referencing Wiley's Ice Ring with icy synths and dub-style bass. This album made DJs pay attention, it made jazz blogs pay attention. It hinted strongly at the sound that Boyd would later fully realize on Dark Matter. Finally, we have the early mixtapes, Footsteps of Our Fathers and Time and Space. These aren't polished studio albums, but they're essential listening. Released digitally and often shared freely, these projects show Boyd experimenting in real time. Jazz drumming sits alongside samples, spoken word, and lo-fi electronic textures. The titles themselves suggest where his mind was at. Lineage, history, cosmos, evolution. For fans, these mixtapes are like sketches in an artist's notebook. You hear ideas forming, you hear instincts developing, you hear a musician searching and finding his path. Together, these Soul and Exodus releases tell a clear story. Moses Boyd isn't reacting to trends, he's building a language. And you're tuned into the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashani Silva. On this week's episode, it's about Moses Boyd, his biography, and best hits. Now it's time for some trending music news. So we're talking about a bold new chapter in jazz fusion led by composer and visionary Levi D'Andre. His latest project, aptly titled Powerhouse, brings together an astonishing ensemble of 24 world-class musicians creating a modern fusion masterclass. Anchoring the rhythmic pulse are drumming legends Dave Weckl and Nika Niles, alongside bass icons John Petitucci and Tom Kennedy. Laid atop this Powerhouse foundation are guitar giants Mike Stern and Frank Gampel, delivering soaring melodies that dance effortlessly with the intricate arrangements. And in saxophonists like Eric Marienthal and Gary Meek, trumpet and trombone brilliance, global percussion from Michael Spiro and Celso Alberti, and ethereal vocals from Claudia Villela on the track Too Sweet, and you've got a sound that's at once technically dazzling and deeply soulful. Levi D'Andre describes the projects as more than just notes. It's about harmony, collaboration, and pushing jazz fusion into new territory. From virtuosic solos to immersive ensemble grooves, Powerhouse is a celebration of jazz's past, present, and future. So if you're a fan of fusion that excites the senses while honoring the genre's lineage, this is one record you don't want to miss. So that was some trendy music news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashani Silva. We're going for a short break, we'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about more of Moses Boyd's best albums of all time. Stay tuned.